This is the Conservative Crusader.
So we have a guest on the line for one of the first times on a normally scheduled programming. Usually this is a special interview, but we have big news to talk about with a candidate right now pertaining ballot access, pertaining the governor's race in the state of Ohio. So joining me now is a pastor from around the Dayton area in Ohio, independent candidate for governor of Ohio. His name is Niel Petersen. Mr. Petersen, thank you for joining me today here on the Conservative Crusader.
Josh, it is always a pleasure to be on, and we've got obviously a lot to talk about, so I think we need to get started.
Yeah, there was a harsh blow to your campaign, and I appreciate you coming on such short notice. A harsh blow to your campaign came from the Secretary of State's office earlier this week, or I guess it was last week now, when he announced you fell 555 signatures short of the required 5,000 to get on the November independent ballot, or the general election ballot. Were you told who signed these rejected signatures and why these signatures were rejected?
No, we weren't told why they were rejected, and we weren't told who signed, but we have that data now. And let me very succinctly and quickly tell you, we weren't told anything by the Secretary of State other than the fact that we were invalidated. In fact, simultaneously, while we were discovering we're invalidated, the Secretary of State had published a press release, and within minutes, the Cincinnati Enquirer had published an article that shortly after their first published, they updated that article, and they had noted that we had 4,445 valid signatures, which, of course, as you mentioned, was a deficit of 555. I find those numbers odd, 444, 5555. But we then had to request further information from the Secretary of State, which they did not give us any of the information that I requested, which was how many signatures were short and a couple of other pieces of data. And we had to painstakingly, county by county, over the next 48 hours from this last Monday, a week ago today, we had to start calling counties and requesting the certification of the petitions. And simultaneously, I had requested from the Secretary of State that all petitions get forwarded to me. And it took them about 48 hours before they did acknowledge and get back with my request with one Dropbox folder of all 88 counties, their respective petitions and the codes. But we had to do, and get this, Josh, we had to do in about 72 hours what it took the state to do in 77 days, which we had to catalog. We had to go line by line of about 1,100 part petitions and go over every petition and look for every code and catalog the code so that way we can actually have a fair and accurate viewpoint of where our deficit was. This has not been easy. I think the process is meant to be demoralizing. And maybe that is going to fit into one of your other questions. But that is how we came to some of the numbers that we'll unpack as your questions lead.
So you're telling me that your campaign, a few volunteers from what I understand, your campaign is entirely volunteer ran, did in a few days what the Secretary of State's office took almost 90 days, almost 3 months to do? Well,
to be fair, we didn't validate addresses, right? So we didn't go through each individual, which is what the county does. The Secretary of State, there's another axe to grind there because the Board of Elections, I mean, we see that there's no continuity between these counties. So, for example, I can have a county that maybe had to validate 6 signatures, and it took them till the very early part of July. Through a little bit of research, I found that the Secretary of State gave these counties up to July 3rd. Now, that's not published information. That's just, investigative research that we had to do. The latest I saw a timestamp was July 6th. Most of these counties had their certified petitions back, which means that their Board of Election went through and they checked to see if the individual was registered. They checked to see if the individual had a valid signature. And then there's a litany of different codes if the person was not registered address, if they were not a registered voter, if the signature was not genuine, if it was illegible, etc. But so we had to, though, go back through those petitions just to record all the codes, which still means line by line. So it wasn't all of what they did, but it was still a good chunk of the motions, the same type of motions. And the process is 2.5 months. Now, think about this. You're GOP, Josh. I love the grand old party. I've been Republican my entire life, but there is clearly a contempt to make sure that individuals who are not party affiliated because they feel like the party is compromised, they, and I say they, the establishment, right? They maybe being the Secretary of State, they may be the Board of Elections. They clearly have a separate set of rules for independents. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a separate set of rules. It's not a fair election when we have to collect 5 times the number of signatures, and the major parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party, need to collect 1,000. And so we're not comparing apples to apples. So yeah, and you know, as time permits, I'll get into what we're going to do about it.
Well, that's my next question is, what is your campaign doing? You have to re-verify these signatures, if that's even a acceptable process with the Secretary of State's office. What is your campaign doing to move forward to re-verify this time around, and how can our listeners help?
So right now, we have, when we went through, and we're missing a very short amount of data at this point from 1 or 2 counties that was not accurately in the Dropbox. The Dropbox information that was given to us from the counties. There were 2 counties that did not have the right information. But as of this moment, and that information is fairly minuscule at this point, but we have 532 registered voters that the Board of Elections said that their signature does not match what they have on file. Now, Josh, you and I both know that, but not only just by a popular vote, if you were to just ask friends, coworkers, or even do an independent polling yourself, know that most people, when they sign electronically, it's never truly depicting their actual signature. Most people I talk to have several signatures at best, but almost unanimously, the people that I ask, including myself, probably including you, if you were to say, when you sign electronically, even the signature that may be on your license is not what may it look like on your, when you actually sign on paper. And so we have counties that are making basically subjective conclusions that they disqualified. And this is not per se, this is fact. 532 of our 555 that were short are disqualified because somebody at the boards of elections in their respective 88 counties said that they don't think that this signature matches what's on file. Now, that means that we are 42, that we're 20, 42, 52, 23. 23 signatures away. Now, here's the deal. We have 532 that were not genuine with the code. We have 62 signatures that are considered, that have codes called illegible. We have, I'm looking at the numbers now. We have another, let me see here. We have another 116 that were not registered addresses, which means that these signatures, they were registered voters, but the address that they indicated was not their actually registered address. And then we have a whole nother set of signatures that I'm looking here through, that are illegible. And so when we covered that, the 62, I'm looking for another group. Regardless here, we have some other anomalies. So for example, we have 20 signatures which is, if anybody's ever seen a petition, there's 20 signatures on a petition. And we have one whole petition that was never even audited. There was a little sticky note that said, ask Secretary of State. The petition is completely fine. So there's another 20 signatures that it was never even audited. So we have absolutely plenty of signatures that should have been validated to get us on the ballot. So the question is what are we going to do about it? Well, right now we're going to do the only thing we can do, which is to challenge. Now, what we're going to be doing, we've been working with our legal team, and we have been looking at that we are going to ask the court that they honor that these signatures are that these signatures should be validated, and that we're going to file a writ of mandamus, and we're going to ask several things. Number one, we are going to ask that the 532 signatures be validated. And this is why. There's nothing in the Ohio Revised Code that actually indicates that a signature has to be validated through some type of means. By the very nature, this is the circulator signed. And he said, I acknowledged that Josh has now signed a petition. And so are we signature verification experts? Right. And the answer is clearly no.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I couldn't read someone else's signature. Most of the time, it's the first letter in a line. That's about it for a signature.
Yeah. And just because it may be different on a voter roll, it doesn't mean that that person's not genuine. It just means that what happens if, think about this, for 9 months we collected signatures, tedious process. And many people say, hey, you should have collected more. Well, we collected what we collected. We worked as hard as we could. And the reality is when you're standing in the rain on a clipboard or on the side of a car or in line on your way out of a rally or, in the cold at the Ohio State spring game, everything in between. These are people that acknowledge that they're registered. It's not that they're not registered. These are registered voters. Everything else checks out. Their address checks out, right? They're a registered voter, but they're saying that signature. So this is part of the process that we need fundamental change in the state of Ohio. And that goes across the board. That's not just about independents, right? But clearly when they raise the threshold 5 times, there's a separate set of rules. Now, there's another angle that we're looking at too. And that is we are going to also ask the court, and I don't have time to get into some of the court cases and some of the law that has been ruled upon, right? Because there's good cases, there's bad cases, but we still believe that there is enough court rulings out there that we have a strong case. And that is that we want to present to the court that why doesn't independents have a primary in the same way that the Republicans and Democrats do? And you know what they say, Josh? They say, well, because an independent is actually not a party, right? So they say they're non-affiliated. So there is no primary. Well, I beg to differ, because even though they're unaffiliated, because there would never be an I on the ballot anyway. They would be an unaffiliated unaffiliated candidate on the ballot. But there should still be the right for independent candidates to only need to collect 1,000 signatures, valid, just like the Republicans, just like the Democrats. If you were a minor party, libertarian, if you were a Green Party, right, constitutional party, you only need 500 signatures. So think about this. Minor parties have a primary. Major parties have a primary. The independents bypass the primary, go to the general, but they know that process is going to be tedious. So that's another thing we're going to ask the court to rule upon and basically order Frank LaRose to put us on the ballot. And so we're looking at a couple of other angles that I'm not ready to bring up just yet. But those are the 2 major points that we are going to present evidence of the 532 out of the 62 illegible signatures that we have. We have already independently verified half of them. So just right there, and when I say illegible, there's some that are truly illegible. You can't make it out. But think about this. You're at the boards of election. You're looking at it. You're like, is that Brown Street? Is that Brownie Street? Illegible. Can't read it. Not everybody's going to spend the amount of time that we're going to spend confirming that that's a valid address. We have done it. We've gone through it. We have about 700 total signatures that we say these should be valid signatures. So we're going to take it to the highest office in Ohio, the highest court in Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court. And we're going to ask for a writ of a mandamus that the court rules in our favor to put us on the November ballot.
With the numbers you're giving me now, even if some of your verification, your independent verification is rejected, you have plenty to get on the ballot. You only need 5,000. You're 500 short. And I agree with you. The numbers are suspicious with that, how perfect that seems to be.
It's interesting. And I'll say this, there was a lot of talk, and there's court cases that have been ruled favorably in Ohio to get affidavits for every person. Now, we went down that road for momentarily. Remember, today is a week. We didn't hear about our rule. We didn't hear that we weren't on the ballot till around 3:00. We didn't get anything from the Secretary of State until Wednesday, late afternoon. And then we still had to get some other pieces. So, we've only been sitting on this data for a few days of you working very diligently to try to put these numbers together. They weren't given to us. But there was a lot of talk, and we even expressed some interest in attempting to get affidavits for all 532. Now, that's not really possible. And I know the court would rule favorably. I believe that is just not simply possible. There's people on vacation. There's people that may have moved. I mean, we have signatures going back 9 months. But the reality is we should be able to get a sampling and show that the process is fundamentally flawed, that there's people in the boards of election that are determining that person is not who they say they are. By the fact that they're signing, they are letting their intent be known, that them as a registered voter, that they're signing their name, and the circulator is then signing their name, that they vouch for that individual, that they want that particular candidate an option to be on the ballot. That's it. They're not voting for them. They're saying, I acknowledge that I want this individual a right to be voted upon. They're not voting for them. And so, this is the part that we are absolutely protesting. We need affirmative action and change to be changed as it relates to how individuals are actually make ballot access.
And I have to ask, because I'm sure you've investigated this a lot, with signatures, you cannot read a signature from one time to another. Just signing multiple places on a contract, your signature might be different. Is there a set process or even computer software that can detect these signatures for the offices that are verifying them? Or is it just a random person sitting there on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 at their desk eating Cheetos, seeing what kind of signature and see if they want to reject it or not?
Yes. Yeah, the latter. And so there, as I spent 6 years in the military signing all the military documents. It was funny. For some reason, earlier in our campaign, I was looking for some military information, and I saw my signature, and it was vastly different than how I signed today. And I signed a fast way. I signed, if it's going to be nicer, I signed slower. But this is what holds true, that even software is not able to pick up people's different types of signatures. Now, there's going to be similarities in maybe how they do a letter or a curve and so forth. But the reality is, and we've investigated this, when you have somebody that is that they're a professional as it relates to investigating, let's say, fraudulent activity with, writing checks, right? Fraudulent checks. Well, they spend hours, Josh. They spend hours analyzing one signature and looking at the person's other signatures, and they tediously look at the different strokes, the angle of the pen, the pressure of the weight. So if we have professionals that take them hours and their life is dedicated to the forensics of signing and determining if this was the same person, how are we going to trust the boards of election that somebody that's in the office, which there's no standard operating procedures, how are we going to trust them that they have what it takes to decide by looking at what they have maybe on record from a time you went and voted on one of those little digital keypads versus what they see on the clipboard? And the answer is it's impossible. And this is why the signature indicates intent. The signature should not be weighted against one time in history that they have on file versus potentially years later, as I indicated, of maybe when they even recorded that person's signature. So the process is flawed. And this is what we want to communicate with the court. The process is flawed.
So you'll be taking it to the court as you've indicated. And I have another question about the Secretary of State's office. According to my calendar, you were supposed to find out on the 15th of July when your signatures were verified or not. You found out on Monday, the 18th. That's against the Secretary of State's law and their guidelines, is it not?
Not only is it not, this is a prime example. And I'm going to tell your audience this, and this makes us cry here. But we had 162 signatures that were thrown out because of several factors. And some of them we knew about, but we had to submit them anyway. So, for example, we had some circulators that sent us their petitions that they circulated for us, but they forgot their address. Well, it was in the 11th hour. We didn't know who the person was. We didn't have time, so we submitted it anyway. But we had 162 signatures thrown out because there were certain things that were missing from the petition that's very clearly indicated in the Secretary of State's guidelines. So, for example, there's 20 signatures on a petition, and there is a tally. So if you only collected 6 on that petition, you have to add it up and hit 6. If that's left blank and you got 6 valid signatures, they're all null and void. Okay? We have to understand that in fact, I'm looking at now, it's 167, not 162. We have to swallow our pride and say, legitimately, these ones don't count because we didn't play by their rules. And we just say we messed up for many different reasons, right? And it's sorrowful, but at the same token, it was our bad. It could be our bad because we knew about it or we didn't know about it, but it was clearly laid out. We're not even protesting those because we didn't follow the rules. We're not protesting people who signed that they weren't registered voters, right? We're not even protesting those who are registered voters, but they put their wrong address. We're not even protesting those. And in some case, if we had more time, we may actually look, because you have to remember their voter rolls may be wrong. So we don't even know that. Like, there's 2 people at our church that signed, and it was a mother and a son, an adult son who lived in our house. I saw it was an NRA code, non-registered address. Well, they're registered voters, but they had just moved. Now, we don't have the time to go and say, did you file? Did you go and get your address updated? But we still, under those circumstances, we say, okay, this was correct ruling. You disqualified them because it was wrong. I say all of that. How is it the Secretary of State has clear, defined rules, right? And we have to accept their rules, and we have to accept their timeline. We had to file before 4 p.m. on May 2nd. If we would have come after 4 p.m., it would have been invalid, right? So now they have 75 days to validate. Last Friday would have been 74 days. They went 77 days on Monday, later in the day, Monday. So all I'm trying to say, Josh, to your listeners, is that you can't have one set of rules that we have to follow and another set of rules that you can decide whether you want to or whether you don't want to follow. And so we're also going to bring that up, and I'm glad you mentioned that. We're also going to look at filing a potential other writ of mandamus on that factor alone, that there was an undue hardship on our part for the amount of time that they caused us, already having 2.5 months. And I want to say one last thing, Josh, in regards to this. 75 days when this ruling came, it was actually based on a court case. And the court case determined that the Secretary of State, to get all of the petitions to their perspective and to their respective boards of elections in the counties, that 75 days was enough time for the boards of election to do their part, to get it back to the Secretary of State for them to validate. But do you realize that was before technology? So you mean to tell me now everything's scanned, everything is digital communications, and we're still holding to the same standard that everything had to, all communications were snail mail and everything was antiquated as it relates to timeliness? So, we have some real fundamental changes that we should see, that we are believing that the court should rule favorably, that it exceeded their time frame, which is once again, that puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to fair and honest elections.
You're already just a few months from the election, and then you have to wait even more days to wait to find out if you're on the ballot or not. That is Niel Petersen, independent candidate for governor. Niel, where can people find you, learn more about your campaign, and possibly help out with this whole signature lawsuit battle?
Yeah, Josh, absolutely. And I want to say this in closing. We're not sore losers. We know that we should have had a lot more signatures. That is always the goal. Everybody wants to run faster, make more money. There's always great intentions, but sometimes when you cross a finish line, it is what it is. And when we crossed May 2nd finish line, we had 6,000 signatures. But what we are protesting is that if you take out some of the inconsistencies of how the Secretary of State and how the boards of elections actually validate true people that express their interest in wanting to see us on the ballot, we have the obligation to the 6,000 people that said, yes, Niel, Mike, we want to see you on the ballot. We have an obligation to fight for them. And that's what we're going to do. And so right now, our campaign is a little bit on a standstill. We know it's somewhat demoralizing to our supporters. We know right now it is somewhat demoralizing to our team. But we're going to continue to fight until we can't fight anymore. And so please, for those who can help right now, there's a little bit of a private battle that we have to just work out with our lawyers. We have asked everybody to go to our website, nielpetersen.com/validate. And if you signed our petition or if you circulated a petition, please go there and just fill out the form. That's just it's kind of a needle in a haystack, but it's a database that we are actually aggregating. So at least we know some people that we have additional contact information for that we may not have had from the petition. But you can follow us on social media, Niel Petersen for governor, nielpetersen.com. We're going to continue to fight. The conservative voice now more than ever. As you can see, the mandates are rolling back. The masks are coming back on. The World Health Organization is continued to rule with their edicts that are unconstitutional. And you continue to see that Mike DeWine and Nan Whaley will not represent the conservative voice. And so if we have it our way, we want to give Ohio voters an opportunity to vote for a real conservative.
All right, and I verified it just to make sure the website, it's actually nielpetersen.com/verify, so people can get the correct link and make sure it's taken to the right website. So NIEL.
I'm so glad you did that. I was looking at another in our database. I called that validate. And so I'm so glad you did that. You're right. I just pulled it up. nielpetersen.com/verify. Thank you for that correction.
Not a problem. I wanted to make sure my listeners got the correct place to go. So it's nielpetersen.com/verify. If you signed his petition, if you circulated his petition, Niel Petersen, thank you for your time today.
Josh, thank you as always. Keep up the great work.
You too, and I can't wait to see where this goes. It'll be very interesting to follow, and I hope the court rules in your favor. My name is
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. My name is GOP Josh. This has been the Conservative Crusader on the Red Future Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in today, and we will see you all on Thursday with a brand new episode. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Conservative Crusader.